try one more, medium speed. Basically, the camera will be upside down.
So you want to work at the pictures, huh?
Friendly reminder for all operators, only roll when you see the slate, please. Thank you.
Copy that. They're making an adjustment on the slate, and then the slate's flying in.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert from Machado Visuals, and here's a quick breakdown of what's easily one of my biggest jobs every year. It's season 3 of a competition-style cooking show called This Is Fire, and I actually did a breakdown on the previous season last year, and it's probably one of my favorite videos that I've ever done for the channel. The previous season was a really big success, so it's always a bit of a tall order on coming up with ways to improve upon what's already worked for us in the past. A lot of my references in pre-pro had a lot of imagery from the newer Chef's Table pizza. I was obsessed with how DP Adam Bricker presented these personal stories of chefs all around the world and how their cultural perspectives can just transform a classic dish that everyone loves. Although it's a docuseries, there's so much mood and tonality, and the stylistic depictions have so much gravity that it really is a pleasure to watch, and is one of my goals coming off of the last season of This Is Fire was to hone in on how we can shape light and add some contrast throughout the show so that not everything looked like a bright white kitchen. In terms of cameras, we have our usual suspects. There were a total of 7 FX9s on the floor, 1 master on a jib, 2 following the contestants, 2 getting tight details, 1 following the host, and another hidden at the back of the set focused on the stoves. On top of that, we replaced our 4 overheads with 2 of the new Sony FR7 PTZ cameras. I'll be honest, these little monsters were amazing and are actually a pretty big deal in the world of PTZ cameras. For starters, they're the first full-frame PTZ with interchangeable lenses and is essentially a remote FX6. I think Sony made a huge play with these cameras, considering how often you see FX cameras out in the real world, and being able to supplement that with essentially the same image quality for reality or live event applications is pretty massive. Setup wasn't nearly as complicated as I thought it was. Once they're all connected to a network switch, you can just use the controller's auto IP function to automatically assign the cameras, which is great because that's about the extent of my network capability. For this show, it was super helpful being able to move around and follow talent and adjust shot sizes on the go, such as getting a wide of the prep table to show the entire spread and then punching in to show individual ingredients. You can set a bunch of preset positions to have the camera zap to different areas of interest and then take over the operating using the joystick. We used the 28 to 135 kit lens so we could have the power zoom functionality, and it's honestly not a terrible lens, and I use it all the time for a lot of my corporate work as a kind of general purpose catch-all lens with great range and autofocus. It was a bit difficult sourcing 2 full kits as they literally just came out, and they're still a little bit of a niche item, but they were incredible at capturing angles that we previously couldn't achieve using static overhead cameras.
Those PTZ cams are really awesome.
They're pretty clutch.
Yeah.
For all the lenses, we were pretty much on the Sony G Master zooms, except for our jib, which instead used a 28 to 100 Premista, which is probably some of my favorite glass. It has a beautiful warm quality with a really great range, and I just love how it renders skin tones. For a lot of our B-roll, we used a set of Tribe 7 Blackwing lenses for a modern and expressive look, akin to something like Chef's Table, and the Blackwings are really neat because they offer 3 different tunings that effectively change how much character they exhibit, so you can sort of curate different characteristics depending on what you need for the project. We had the XT tuning, which are the X-Tune lenses with T flares. The 37 felt super unique with the most beautiful focus fall off and really heavy halation and aberration during the rainbow flares, and that's what we used for all of our top-down food shots. We used the 107 for a lot of our tighter details, and I used the flares as kind of a creative tool to reveal specific moments of the plating process as kind of an in-camera light leak, which I found really pleasing. For all our close-up work, I used a 100mm Raptor macro from IB Optics, which is a German lens company that specializes in macro lenses, and the difference in detail is astounding, and it's night and day when compared to something like a Tokina macro. They have a really wonderful clarity throughout the entire range that I feel like I never really found with the Tokina. Now granted, the lens is like 15 times more expensive, but it was great being able to showcase all the individual ingredients each contestant used and their different approaches to cooking the same dish. All right, so before I talk about our lighting setup, I want to talk about the other 50% of any good video, which happens to be the sponsor of today's video, Audio. Audio is a music subscription service with a library that's meticulously handpicked for video creators like myself. They've featured tracks on everything from Netflix to Super Bowl commercials, and the UI is super easy to navigate so that I can find exactly what I'm looking for. I'm a big fan of finding songs using their playlists to evoke a specific mood on whatever I'm working on. Not only does Audio Pro include unlimited music downloads, but they also have 30,000 high-quality sound effects, such as atmospheric elements and environment ambience, and it makes it really easy to help build immersion in a scene. Audio Pro licenses are already cleared for distribution on any platform, as well as commercial use for client work, and the great thing is that they never expire, so you can literally use those assets forever. In fact, all the music you're hearing in this video is from Audio, so if you like what you hear, check out the link in the description to save 70% off your first year of Audio Pro. Now let's talk lighting. So I was actually pretty happy with how our lighting setup turned out from the previous season, and the only real note I had for myself was that I wanted a bit more headroom with exposure so that we weren't required to shoot all the way open for most of our cameras. Essentially, I wanted to use the same lighting setup, just brighter. Our slowest lens was a 100-400, which has a variable aperture, so at a minimum, I wanted to light everything at a 5.6 so our operators could change focal lengths freely without having to worry about their exposure. Because of this, I decided to go with pretty much all Nanlux and Nanlite fixtures on the main set, mainly because of their huge output. Most of our units were daylight balanced because we didn't really need the bicolor functionality, and like I just mentioned, I preferred having the extra output. Our key lights were two 720 daylights that were cross-keying with Shamir softboxes, and we added the egg crates so that they wouldn't contaminate whoever was standing right under them. We also had two 720 daylights back over the stoves to give that area some ambient fill, as well as two 650 dynos staged right to illuminate the spice rack area. Towards the front, we had two massive 1200 dynos with LCDs as our fill, and these things are absolute bonkers. They're brighter than a SkyPanel 360 with a wider beam angle, so they're great at spreading light across an area or filling up a large frame. We actually used a third 1200 with a 5-foot octa for our contestant hero shots, which is probably one of my favorite new combos because you generally need a lot of output with Magic Cloth since it just sucks up a ton of light, and the wider beam angle fills up the entire octa super evenly. DP Rodrigo Prieto actually just used this exact setup on the new Barbie movie for some of the day exteriors, which I also thought was super neat. A regular SkyPanel S60 is also a great pairing with the 5-foot octa, and is actually what I'm using to light this video right now, but I always end up having to move the fixture pretty close to the subject to get both the quality and intensity that I'm happy with, so the 1200 dyno is my preferred fixture because of its insane output. Lastly, we had a 900C barreling through the window, and I positioned the shear so that it was only hitting the backsplash in between each stove for just a little bit of texture. I first saw the 900C earlier this year at NAB, and it was a great tool since our director wanted to have a little bit more of a stylistic mood for a lot of the hero shots and B-roll. And what really blew me away was just how much color saturation the LEDs have. We were able to dial in a really super specific hue of blue that had so much more vibrance than any other RGB LED I've ever used. When we reset for the show lighting, we just set it to a warmer 4300 Kelvin for a more normalized look. All of our lights were linked via DMX via blackout, so we had full control over our lights in the sky, as well as presets for each scene that we had lit for.
This is my washing machine dial.
I'd always been curious about the Lightbridge CRLS system, and this ended up being a perfect application for a lot of our tabletop work. For those that might not know, they're basically outrageously expensive reflectors with varying levels of diffusion that affect your spread. They're neat tools because you can light with one source and use multiple CRLS reflectors to redirect and accent your subject in a ton of different ways. In this instance, I was using one 1200B to texturize the background and redirected it back around the plate with a few of our 25 centimeter boards. Then for fill, we had a sky panel at 60 on a goalpost going through a frame of 216. We had the Hudson Spider slider mounted on a Fisher dolly, and honestly, this combo is now probably on my absolute must-haves whenever I'm doing food stuff because of the ability to quickly reposition camera height in front of and above the plates, as well as being able to boom up and down and add some dimensionality to the dishes. I could go from an overhead to level with the table in within a minute, and it basically streamlined our entire workflow. Our confessional setup was more or less the same. We used a 300D with a smaller light dome overhead with a 4x shiny bounce as our butterfly light. We also threw up a 2-foot double rainbow behind talent as a hair light and a couple of stairs in the background, as well as a smaller 60X to rake the shelf for some added texture. This is hands down one of my favorite jobs every year, and although the content is pretty much the same, I still learn so much every time I do these jobs, and I wouldn't be able to do it without my crack team of ACs helping me manage up to 13 different cameras at once. So special shout out to them and everyone else that was on the crew. It's super refreshing having pure creative freedom to just craft your own visual language with a bunch of dope people and eating some really good food. Again, huge thanks to Audio for sponsoring this video and keeping breakdowns like these free on YouTube. But if you want to see more behind the scenes content from this project, I have hours of footage available right now over on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.